Hey, future managers, welcome back. So I'm going to go through some of the main terms we may talk about when we're talking about quality control. So in the first video, I gave you guys an example of said, okay, maybe we want 93% quality. So let me break down a little bit more of how we kind of come up with that number for you guys. And I'll just kind of talk about some of the elements that might go into total quality control. So this is definitely a subset within quality that's very important. In the manufacturing industry, you kind of live and die by this, but it's not something that you're only going to see if you work in manufacturing. These are things that are well spread in many different areas. I know in working in IT management is something that we worked with a lot as well. So just be familiar with these terms. The first is total quality management. And so let me back up a little bit. When I'm talking about a lot of quality control stuff, let me back up to talking about the 1980s. So there was a guy named Deming. I mentioned briefly in chapter 2 when we were talking about history. But Deming actually, one thing that was going on in the 80s is we were pumping out tons and tons and tons of stuff, high volume of stuff, and we weren't really paying attention to what quality was going in. So all of these things that I'm about to talk about weren't really something that we were cognizant of. And so Deming saw this, and he actually went over to Japan and started working with a company called Toyota on a quality system. And so there's a lot of things that came out of it, a whole different style of quality management. But see, there's some of the key things that Toyota and Deming came up with that are now superpowers and really helping us to be able to make sure we can compete globally. Because honestly, the U.S. was the only one who was making all these mass goods up into the 1980s, and then Japan came in and said we can make these goods not only for cheaper through a method called continuous improvement, but we can also have a higher quality. And the reason they could do them cheaper is because they don't have to throw bad ones out or give people refunds because they're making a better product to begin with. So let's talk about some of the tools they're doing to use this. The first is basically saying, okay, total quality management says, listen, we're going to commit to having quality. We're not going to accept just the fact that we have to throw out, 10% of the items because they're junk. We're going to strive for zero defects. We're going to try everything we can to eliminate all the different factors that are causing this to throw us away, because that's costing us time, it's costing us money, it's taking us away from our target, it's keeping us from being competitive. So we're going to strive for zero defects. So one way they would do that is using something called continuous improvement. And this is something you're going to see in all industries. That's basically you're always searching for new ways to improve work quality and performance. All right, and that's something that I really enjoy doing as part of my job, is trying to find new ways to be as efficient and as effective as possible. And one thing I found, especially in big companies, that there is always room to find that continuous improvement. And so you're never there, right? So even if you've gone around and said, okay, I've improved this, you continue going and you kind of operate in circles. Come back around and always look for new ways to improve the work quality and performance. All right, so there's continuous improvement. And then the last is through a tool called Six Sigma. So you'll learn a little bit about this if you take operations, if you're a management major. But basically Six Sigma says, okay, the only defects we're going to accept are going to be 3.4 defects per 1 million units of good. And so that's what we are always striving for, is to get to Six Sigma, to try to get those defects down as low as possible. 3.4 defects per million is considered to be a reasonable rate. And so one thing that we use are these control charts. And so we used to use these a lot when I was working with engineering. So I was working a lot with really cool, expensive metals. And so we would get maybe a bunch of pipes in, which you're like, oh, pipes, check it off, they look good to me. But we had to test the metal in each and every one of those pipes. And then we'd look at these control charts and say, are they in the desired composition that we need? So there's actually tiny little holes. And so if there was too many of these holes in a certain perspective, it would be on the upper control limit. It means there's too many holes, it's too porous, it could theoretically get a bubble and pop when it's under pressure. And the lower control limit, if it was too dense, then maybe it wouldn't be able to expand the way it needed to when the heat got to it. So there's a lot of really interesting things. These control charts are just some tools that you use within quality to try to help you figure out how do we have the highest quality product possible. So I just wanted you to kind of be familiar with some of those terms. And like I said, if you're going to go to operations, you'll learn a lot more about it. This is another kind of a cool thing to talk about. And again, I just want you to be familiar with some of these terms. This is inventory control. So inventory control basically says, there's two different mentalities about it. But you're trying to figure out if you can control your inventory, you can control your costs. And if you can control your costs, then you're going to be able to hopefully keep your prices down to keep you competitive in the marketplace. And so there's two kind of ways that you can look at this, and I'll share which ones that I've worked primarily in a moment. But again, there can be two mentalities. It depends on the product, how expensive it is, how much space it takes up on the shelves, etc. The first is economic order quality. That's basically saying, hey, whenever we get to a certain level of inventory, we're going to reorder it again. So maybe we always buy 100 bolts. And so maybe when we get down to only having 25 bolts left, we order another 100. And so we keep using the economic order quantity, and you're always predetermining ordering just to keep that inventory up so we never run out. That's an economic order quantity. So that's kind of saying you always are keeping, so maybe each bolt costs $10. So if you're always keeping 25 in stock, that means you're always keeping $250 in cost sitting on your shelf, so that's always something. It's kind of it kind of goes back to you can talk to your accounting professor whether it's an asset or a liability, but you're always keeping that $250 in bolts in stock, and that's always kind of a cost sitting on your books. So for that reason, most people go into just-in-time scheduling. Just-in-time scheduling basically says, listen, we don't necessarily want this to be just sitting on our shelves, in our books costing us money. Whenever we get a material in, we want it to go as quick as possible from delivery right into being what we call a WIP, work in progress. We want it to be part of and assembled in the actual machine, so it's not sitting as a part on the shelf. And so that's why this whole concept of inventory control just-in-time scheduling has come in. So I can't tell you how much work goes into trying to make sure and schedule out and figure out when we need a certain item to arrive so that we can then the next day install it in the machine so that it's not sitting on our books. And it's a very kind of aggressive method. It's depending on the cost and how granular you get about it. If you're doing it with nuts and bolts, it gets a little granular. But you want to make sure that for the big ticket items that it can go right into WIP as soon as possible so they're not sitting on your books, because you want them to be as installed in the machine and not just sitting on the shelf, taking up space and costing you money. Alright, so those are two kind of methods, again, for inventory control. So again, these are things to think about above and beyond controlling your people, but also trying to look at how do we control our quality, how do we control the parts in our shop. Alright, and so one of the last things I really want to talk to you guys about today is this concept of a balanced scorecard. So a balanced scorecard is going to start with the organizational mission and vision, and then it's going to build goals and performance measures for a variety of factors. So it's going to look at your financial performance. So you're basically trying to look at, did we set out what we meant to? Did we increase our sales? Did we reduce our costs? Do we have the quality measures that we wanted to? So all these things are kind of financial performance. The second is customer satisfaction. So, are we getting the customer satisfaction results we want? The third is internal process improvement. So I'd mention that continuous improvement. What have we done to help our processes not to hold us back, to keep us moving forward, to help us running smoothly in the shop? And then last, what are we doing in innovation and learning? How are we investing in our people? How are we kind of keeping up with what our competitors are doing? And so this is kind of an example of the balanced scorecard. So here is an example of a balanced scorecard that you might see out in the business world. So as a reminder, everything always comes back to your mission and vision. So you always usually see those right at the front because you want to make sure whatever it is you're accomplishing, financial, customer, processes, organizationally, you want to make sure it's all coming back to your mission and vision. So this one right here, the vision was transforming society through high-speed mobile information services. Mission is to be the #1 provider of mobile networks in the UK. That sounds great. And so what they did was they said, okay, what are our financial objectives and strategies, right? We just learned about those under control. We want to increase revenue, increase profitability, and decrease operating costs. Those sound pretty good, right? And then you look on the right-hand side, you'll see measures. All right, how are we going to measure if we're increasing our revenue? We're going to look in our profitability. We're going to look at our profit. How are we know if we're going to decrease our operating costs? We're going to look at our operating costs. And we're going to look at our revenue in our target markets to see if we're increasing it the way we want. And then you see on the right, you have actual percentages that they want to either raise or decrease per year. And so you can see that correlation right there. Second, customer. You want to improve your clarity of your offering for your customer, make sure customers know what they're buying. You want to improve market perception, be like, hey, this is something that, we want to be known for in the marketplace, and you want to make sure that the users have a fantastic end experience. All right, so the ways that you can do that is through your market share index, through your customer satisfaction index, and then again, they numerize that. We're going to go up 3% a year and then 5% over the next period until it stabilizes. So that's definitely saying here are our goals, and here's how we're going to measure our goals. Internal processes. So this is showing what it is we can do to operate better inside our company, because financial and customer are kind of more of an exterior thing, but interiorly we look at improving our offering selection. Maybe we're going to offer more products or higher quality products or more variations of a certain product. We're going to improve information services. So that's something that's definitely going to help feed into our customer perception, which is then going to feed into our revenue. You can see how they're kind of building onto each other. And then last is improving ease of use for end users. Again, those are things that are all going to help improve that experience, decrease costs. So the more easy it is for them to use, the less customer service they're going to need, and the less it's going to cost us, right? So, and again, there's measurements and targets for that. But if you're going to accomplish any of these things, it all comes back to organizational capacity. It comes back to learning and growing as a company, being able to make sure that you're taking care of your people. So you want to make sure that you are always investing in your team, improving their knowledge and skills, okay? I always come back to that self-actualization level of Maslow. You're always investing in your people. You're improving the content supply, so you make sure that the information that's going to the people, the supply's got to be better, right? So you want to make sure if you're providing mobile information, you got to have a good supply of mobile information. And then last is improving technology is going to help with all of these things. And they talk about working into employee development plans, technology training, information efficiency, and how they're going to measure from there. So again, that's just a great example of a balanced scorecard. I'll let you guys go in and watch the video for a little bit more of an example, but you can see these are all interconnected. They all feed into each other. But I also want to say, you can measure all of these things, and I think this is important when it comes to trying to get to results. But keep in mind, you always have to be taking care of your people, all right? You can get so caught up in your targets and your numbers and how you're going to measure them, you can very quickly forget that, you have people working for you, and so it's very important to make sure that you are caring for your people, back to people over profit. And one thing about the balanced scorecard is I feel like this organizational capacity talks about your people. You're talking about your customer. Okay, your customer is part of the people equation. But your organizational capacity is investing in your people as well and your suppliers. So remember that kind of triad of who people are. But think about how we can maybe keep that scorecard balanced in that we're taking care of our people, and it isn't just all about more money, more profitability. It's really more about how do we become holistic. And a balanced scorecard is really kind of the business world's best stab at this right now, but I'm not going to lie. I think that there's still definitely some more room to go when we're trying to think about how do we best put people over profit in this, because right now the customer is still feeding profit. The worker is still feeding profit. So that's something I kind of want you guys to think about as we wrap up here. But that's an example of a balanced scorecard. Go in and watch the YouTube videos that I have for you guys this week. Watch that Simon Sinek video, and I'll really look forward to seeing you guys in our Zoom. Take care. Have a great rest of the day.